It was a chilly morning in Los Angeles, the kind where the sun hadn't fully warmed the city streets yet. The sky hung heavy, filled with that unique quiet before the city fully woke up. Detective Jonathan Hayes sat in his unmarked car, sipping his lukewarm coffee, his mind replaying the strange call he'd received just moments earlier. "There's something under Musk's estate," the voice on the phone had said, frantic and almost too nervous to be believed. "A tunnel. I don't know what's down there, but it's big, way too big to be ignored." He stared out at the sprawling mansion of Elon Musk, the world-famous tech mogul known for pushing the limits of space exploration and electric cars. His estate stood on the edge of Malibu, secluded from the hustle and bustle of the city. Yet today, it seemed to pulse with a strange energy. Something felt wrong. Jonathan shook off the unease settling in his chest. "Could be a hoax," he muttered under his breath, but something in his gut told him otherwise. There was no reason for someone to make up a story like this. He grabbed his phone, dialed his partner, Lisa. She picked up after the second ring. "Jonathan?" Lisa's voice was crisp, the kind of tone she used when she knew something big was about to happen. "We're on our way. What's the situation?" "Get ready for a strange one," Jonathan replied. "We've got a call saying there's a tunnel beneath Musk's estate. I'm heading there now to take a look." Within minutes, both detectives were speeding down the Pacific Coast Highway, their sirens cutting through the quiet morning as the mansion loomed ahead. It was an intimidating structure, with clean lines and sleek modern design. Musk's wealth was apparent in every inch of it, from the perfectly manicured lawn to the security cameras that seemed to monitor every move. Lisa leaned over, looking out at the mansion. "Do you really think there's something under there?" she asked, her voice unsure but filled with curiosity. Jonathan didn't answer immediately. His thoughts were racing. The idea of a secret tunnel beneath one of the most famous homes in the world didn't seem likely. But there was something about this whole situation that felt off. As they pulled up to the gates of the estate, two security guards were already standing at attention, their faces serious, their eyes hidden behind dark sunglasses. They looked like they were expecting them. Jonathan flashed his badge. "Detectives Hayes and Carter. We need to talk to Mr. Musk or someone from his team." The security guard didn't budge. "Mr. Musk is unavailable, but you may come in for a brief conversation." Inside, the house was eerily quiet. There was a strange feeling of emptiness, as if the place was not as bustling as one would expect from such a high-profile individual. A housekeeper led them through the halls, finally stopping at a door near the back of the house that led down into the basement. "This is where it all started," the housekeeper whispered, her voice barely audible. Jonathan gave her a nod and motioned for Lisa to follow him. As they descended into the dimly lit basement, the air grew colder, the scent of old wood and dust thickening around them. The walls of the basement were lined with shelves, crates, and strange pieces of machinery. Some of it looked old, others almost futuristic. But there was one thing that immediately stood out. A small, inconspicuous door at the far end of the basement was ajar, the faint glow of light leaking through. Jonathan exchanged a look with Lisa. Something told him this wasn't just a simple storage room. "Let's take a look," Jonathan said, his voice low but determined. They approached the door carefully, and when Jonathan pushed it open, the sight that greeted them made his stomach drop. Before them was a narrow tunnel that extended far beyond what they could see, its walls lined with metal beams and strange markings that Jonathan couldn't recognize. A faint hum echoed from deep within, and it was clear this was no ordinary passageway. The hairs on the back of Jonathan's neck stood on end. Whatever was down there, it was more than just a simple construction project or a hidden escape route. It was something much bigger. Lisa turned to him, her eyes wide with shock. What is this?" Jonathan didn't have an answer, but deep down, he knew that what they just uncovered was only the beginning of something far bigger than they could ever imagine. Jonathan Hayes had seen a lot in his career. Murders, disappearances, and some cases so strange they couldn't be explained, at least not in any way that made sense. But standing there, staring into the dark tunnel beneath Elon Musk's mansion, he knew this was something different, something beyond anything he'd ever encountered. He motioned for Lisa to step back as he pulled out his phone, quickly dialing the precinct. It wasn't like him to panic, But there was something about the eerie quiet surrounding them that felt unnatural. The hum from the tunnel seemed to reverberate through the floor, making the air feel heavy and thick. He couldn't explain it, but it felt like the ground itself was alive. Lisa stood behind him, her arms crossed over her chest. She was still processing what they'd just seen. "Do you think Musk knows about this?" she asked, breaking the silence. Jonathan shrugged, but even he didn't believe his own words. He's been too busy with his projects, running SpaceX, Tesla, all that. Could he have been hiding something under his own roof? That's a question we're going to have to answer. Jonathan had spent years working his way through the criminal justice system, earning respect through his dogged determination to solve the toughest cases. He wasn't easily spooked. But this felt like it wasn't just another case. It felt like a turning point in his life, one that he wasn't quite ready to face. As they made their way back upstairs, Jonathan found himself thinking about Elon Musk, the man who had single-handedly revolutionized space travel, electric cars, and even social media. Musk was a visionary, a man with big ideas and the money to match them. But behind his public persona, who was he really? The man who seemed to have it all, or something darker hidden beneath the surface? Elon Musk had always been a figure of intrigue, not just for his technological breakthroughs, but for his enigmatic personal life. Despite being in the spotlight constantly, he rarely spoke about himself on a personal level. The public knew he was married, divorced, and remarried a few times, with kids scattered around the globe, but there was always a sense that the world only knew half of the story. And maybe now, Jonathan was beginning to understand why. Musk had spent much of his life surrounded by the cutting edge of technology. He had built a multi-billion-dollar empire with companies that seemed to promise a better, brighter future for humanity. But was there a hidden side to those promises? A side that the public had never seen? As Jonathan thought about it, he realized the possibility that Musk might be involved in something far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. Lisa, sensing the tension in the air, turned to Jonathan. "So what now?" she asked, her voice full of resolve. She wasn't the type to shy away from difficult situations. Jonathan didn't have an answer immediately. He needed time to think, to process the sheer magnitude of what they just stumbled upon. But one thing was certain: they couldn't leave the tunnel unexplored. "I think we need to dig deeper," he said, his voice steady but firm. "This isn't just about a hidden passageway. This is about something much bigger, something that could change everything." As they prepared to leave the estate, Jonathan couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The quiet, unsettling atmosphere of the mansion seemed to follow them, like the walls were holding their secrets tight, unwilling to let them go. Every shadow seemed to loom larger, and every creak of the floorboards made his senses spike. Outside, the world felt a little less certain. The sun was higher in the sky now, but the coldness of the morning lingered in the air. For a moment, Jonathan felt a fleeting sense of normalcy, but it quickly evaporated. They weren't dealing with normal anymore. The tunnel under Musk's villa wasn't just a passage. It was a door to something they might not be able to understand. Lisa walked beside him, glancing up at him with determination in her eyes. She had always been the brave one, the one who faced danger head-on. She had a deep curiosity about people and their secrets, and this case was no exception. "You really think Musk is behind this?" Lisa asked, her tone a mix of skepticism and wonder. Jonathan hesitated. "I don't know, but I do know one thing. There's something down there. And it's not just an abandoned tunnel. Someone went to a lot of trouble to build it. And Musk is at the center of it." The drive back to the station was tense, neither of them speaking much, both lost in thought. Jonathan couldn't stop picturing the tunnel, the glow of it, the hum vibrating through the walls, and that undeniable feeling that they were not supposed to be there. As a seasoned detective, he'd always trusted his instincts, but this was something else entirely. When they got back to the station, they met with the rest of the team, including the forensic experts. The evidence from the mansion wasn't much, but it was enough to raise suspicions. There were strange markings on the walls of the tunnel, symbols that didn't belong to any known alphabet. The air quality down there was abnormal, too, and the vibrations had been recorded as something akin to a low-frequency signal. "There's something we're not seeing here," Jonathan said to the team, his voice firm. We need to find out who built this tunnel and why. And we need to do it fast before anyone else gets hurt. But as they delved deeper into the case, Jonathan realized that this was more than just a strange tunnel. It was the first piece of a puzzle that would lead them down a path that no one could have predicted. The answers they were searching for were buried far deeper than the walls of Musk's villa, and the stakes had just gotten higher than they ever imagined. And with every passing moment, Jonathan couldn't shake the nagging feeling that they were racing against time. Because whatever secrets lay beneath Musk's mansion, they had the potential to change the course of history. The tension had only just begun to set in. Jonathan felt the weight of the discovery bearing down on him with every step he took. The police station, usually a place of mundane paperwork and routine cases, now felt like a war room. He sat in the briefing room, staring at the large whiteboard where the details of the case were starting to pile up. Names, symbols, strange markings, and the tunnel itself. Lisa was pacing back and forth, her mind working at a mile a minute. You think Musk's involved? Or is someone using his estate for something else? She asked, her voice filled with uncertainty but also determination. I don't know, but there's something we're not seeing, Jonathan replied. His gut told him that this was bigger than just Musk, but at the same time, the connection between the tech mogul and the underground tunnel was undeniable. Whoever built that tunnel had money, resources, access. Musk's estate checks all those boxes. But something doesn't sit right. Musk is too smart. He wouldn't leave a loose thread like this. The more they dug, the murkier things got. They'd received no solid answers from Musk's representatives, and the mansion's security footage showed nothing unusual, except for a few mysterious late-night entries to the basement. But those could have been anything. Jonathan leaned forward, his fingers pressing against the table. We need to speak to Musk. If he's hiding something, it's only a matter of time before it comes to light. And right now, we have no reason to rule him out. Lisa stopped pacing and crossed her arms. You think he'd come clean if we asked him directly? Jonathan didn't respond right away. He'd watched the billionaire for years, admired his drive, and seen the headlines of his latest ventures, but that was all the public saw. Behind closed doors, Musk was a man with secrets, and Jonathan was starting to believe that the mansion and the tunnel beneath it were just the tip of the iceberg. I don't know, he muttered, but we'll find out soon enough. Meanwhile, the deeper they got into the investigation, the more strange and unexplained things started to surface. Local rumors were swirling around the mansion. People spoke of unusual construction projects taking place in the middle of the night, trucks coming and going with no explanation, strange sounds echoing through the estate. Some even said they'd seen unusual figures coming and going through the back gates, figures that didn't belong to Musk's usual staff. It was clear something was happening beneath the surface, and Jonathan couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing a vital piece of the puzzle. Then came the next unexpected twist. A call came through to the precinct that made Jonathan's blood run cold. The call came from a source who claimed to know something important about the tunnel, a former employee of Musk's security team. The man on the phone was anonymous, but his voice shook with nervous energy. They've been building something down there, the voice had said, sounding hoarse, like he'd been running for his life. Something they don't want anyone to find out about. I'm telling you, if you go down there, you'll see it. You'll understand why they're keeping it all a secret. The man hung up before Jonathan could ask any more questions, but it was enough to light a fire under him. Get the team together, Jonathan ordered. We need to go back to that tunnel. Whatever's down there, we need to see it for ourselves. By the time they arrived back at Musk's estate, night had fallen. The mansion was shrouded in darkness, the lights casting long shadows against the hillside. The sense of unease had only grown stronger. They were no longer just investigators. They were trespassers, walking into a situation that they didn't fully understand. Jonathan and Lisa met with the head of Musk's security detail. This time, there was no smile, no pleasantries. The man was tight-lipped, unwilling to offer any insight into what was really going on. I've told you everything I know, he insisted. There's nothing here. But Jonathan didn't buy it. The tension was palpable, something was wrong, and it was impossible to ignore. They made their way to the basement again, where the tunnel's entrance lay. Jonathan had his doubts about how much longer they could keep poking around. Every minute they spent on the estate felt like a ticking clock, with someone or something waiting to pounce. "Let's move quickly," Jonathan said, his voice cold and commanding. "We're not leaving until we know what this is." They descended into the basement once more, the door to the tunnel still ajar. The hum from within was even louder now, almost vibrating beneath their feet. It sent an eerie chill up Jonathan's spine. Lisa scanned the area, her eyes narrowed. "What the hell is that sound?" she muttered. Jonathan stepped forward, cautiously walking toward the tunnel entrance. But something stopped him. A noise, a low, distant scraping sound, echoed from deep within the tunnel. It was almost as though something, or someone, was moving down there. His instincts flared. "Lisa, stay back," he ordered. She hesitated but followed his command. Jonathan could feel his heart race as he took a step closer. Every nerve in his body screamed at him to turn back, but the feeling of urgency pushed him forward. And then, something caught his eye, a flicker of movement further down the tunnel. His pulse quickened as he motioned for Lisa to come forward cautiously. "Something's down there," he whispered. "Get ready." The tunnel stretched ahead, dark and narrow, but the hum grew louder as they inched closer. Something was waiting for them in the shadows, something Jonathan wasn't sure he was ready to face. The air grew thicker, and the faint glow that had once been at the end of the tunnel now flickered ominously. There was no turning back. They were about to uncover the secret that Musk had tried so desperately to keep hidden. And whatever it was, it had the power to change everything. The darkness in the tunnel seemed to swallow them whole as they advanced, their flashlight beams dancing over the damp walls. The strange hum continued to reverberate beneath their feet, almost like a heartbeat. Jonathan couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking deeper into something they didn't fully understand, something that was far beyond anything he had encountered before. Every step they took felt heavy, like the weight of the tunnel itself was pushing down on them, urging them to turn back. But there was no going back now. They had to see this through. The flicker of movement they had glimpsed earlier was still haunting their minds, and they needed answers. Lisa stayed close behind, her eyes darting around. "Do you hear that?" she asked, her voice low. Jonathan nodded, the sound of scraping, like metal against stone, growing louder with each step. It wasn't just an animal or a person. This was something deliberate. It almost felt like someone, or something, was trying to stay hidden, but also trying to lead them somewhere. "What the hell is down here?" Lisa muttered, sounding as unnerved as Jonathan felt. "I don't know," he replied, keeping his voice steady. "But we're about to find out." The tunnel twisted and turned, the walls narrowing as they pushed further into the unknown. The air grew colder, almost painfully so, and the hum of the tunnel pulsed with a growing intensity. Jonathan's instincts told him to turn back, but his mind was too focused on one thing: the truth. Suddenly, they reached a section of the tunnel where the walls opened up into a cavernous space. The dim light from their flashlights illuminated strange symbols etched into the stone, symbols that looked ancient, something that didn't belong in a place like this, under a modern mansion. It was like stepping into another world, one that didn't fit with the sleek, high-tech life Musk presented to the world. "What the hell is this?" Lisa whispered, staring at the symbols, her voice filled with awe and fear. Jonathan stepped forward, studying the markings carefully. They didn't match any known language or code. They were something else entirely, like a forgotten script from a time before written history. His mind raced, trying to make sense of it. Before he could voice his thoughts, a sound interrupted him: footsteps. And not the casual footsteps of someone trying to sneak around, but the heavy, deliberate steps of someone in control. Jonathan's heart skipped a beat. "Get down," he whispered urgently, grabbing Lisa and pulling her into the shadow of the tunnel. They crouched, barely daring to breathe as the footsteps grew louder. A figure appeared in the distance, a silhouette against the faint glow of the tunnel's deeper recesses. Jonathan's heart pounded in his chest as the figure came closer, someone in a dark suit, walking with a calm, almost methodical pace. It wasn't Musk. But who was it? And what were they doing down here? The figure stopped just short of where Jonathan and Lisa were hiding. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. Jonathan could barely hear his own breathing as he strained to make out any details. The man, or woman, was tall, with a thin frame and a mask obscuring most of their face. They seemed to be alone, their movements precise, purposeful. Lisa shifted beside Jonathan, trying to get a better view, but he gripped her arm, his eyes never leaving the figure. "Stay still," he whispered. The figure knelt by the stone wall and began fiddling with something. An ancient device, perhaps, that was attached to the symbols. There was a soft clicking sound, and then the ground beneath them seemed to shift. Jonathan could feel it in his bones. The air pressure was changing, and the faint humming sound grew louder. It was a mechanism of some sort. The symbols, the strange device, and the mysterious figure were all connected in a way Jonathan couldn't fully comprehend yet. The ground shook slightly as the device activated, and a door hidden within the cavernous space slowly creaked open. Jonathan's mind was racing. Whatever this was, it was far from ordinary. It wasn't just a hidden passage. It was something far more dangerous, something far more powerful. The figure stood and stepped through the doorway, disappearing into the darkness beyond. "What do we do now?" Lisa whispered, her voice barely audible. Jonathan stood motionless for a moment, his mind spinning. "We follow them," he said, his voice tight with urgency. They waited for a few moments, letting the figure get far enough ahead before slipping out from their hiding spot and inching toward the newly opened doorway. The low hum still echoed in the distance, now coupled with an eerie silence that made every footstep seem unnaturally loud. The door revealed a narrow, descending staircase that led even further into the depths. Jonathan hesitated for only a second before leading the way, the chill in the air growing colder with every step. The walls around them were smooth and strangely polished, an eerie contrast to the rough, jagged tunnel they had just come through. The staircase seemed endless, winding down into the earth with no sign of stopping. There was something almost hypnotic about it, like a pull that couldn't be ignored. "Jonathan," Lisa said, her voice tinged with fear. "This is insane. We're going too deep." "I know," Jonathan said, his voice filled with quiet resolve. "But we can't stop now. Whatever's happening here, we need to understand it." The staircase opened into another large chamber. At first, Jonathan thought it was just more stone, but as they stepped into the space, he realized it was something else entirely. Machines, panels, and strange equipment lined the walls, some of it far more advanced than anything he had ever seen. It was like walking into a secret lab, one that had been hidden away for years, if not decades. There were monitors blinking in the low light, cables snaking across the floor, and in the center of the room, a large glass tank filled with a strange, glowing liquid. Lisa's eyes widened. "What the hell is this?" she asked, stepping closer to one of the monitors. The screen displayed cryptic symbols and a series of coordinates, none of which made any sense to either of them. Jonathan's mind raced. The question that had been gnawing at him for so long now had an answer. This wasn't just a hidden tunnel. This was a facility, an underground lab. And whatever they had uncovered, it was bigger than any mystery he had ever tackled. The stakes had just gotten a lot higher, and they were far from done. Before they could investigate further, the door at the far end of the room opened. Someone else was coming. Jonathan and Lisa froze, their bodies rigid with fear as the door creaked open. The sound was deafening in the silence of the underground chamber. Their eyes darted to the shadows beyond, trying to make sense of the figure that had just entered. The person who stepped into the room was tall, broad-shouldered, and cloaked in the same dark suit as the one they had seen earlier. His face was obscured, hidden beneath the shadows of a mask. But there was something about him that felt wrong, not just because of his secrecy, but because of the deep unease that washed over Jonathan the moment their gazes met. For a moment, Jonathan and Lisa stood motionless, unsure of what to do. The figure took a step forward, his eyes narrowing slightly as they locked onto them, almost as if he had known they would be there all along. Jonathan's heart pounded in his chest, the weight of the moment crashing over him. Every instinct told him to run, to escape and never look back. But something inside him, something deep within his gut, urged him to stay and face whatever this was. "You shouldn't have come here," the figure finally spoke, his voice smooth and deep. yet laced with a warning. It wasn't a threat, but a statement of fact. Lisa took a step back, her hand instinctively moving to her gun holster. Jonathan shook his head, signaling for her to hold off. This wasn't a simple confrontation. They were standing in the heart of something that went beyond a criminal operation or a corporate cover-up. The man's eyes flicked to the monitors, then back at them. "You've seen too much," he continued, his voice carrying a strange sense of finality. "Who are you?" Jonathan demanded, his voice firm despite the knot of fear tightening in his chest. The man didn't immediately answer. Instead, he took a few steps closer, his movements slow, deliberate. The air in the room felt thick, heavy, as if time had slowed down around them. Jonathan could almost hear the heartbeat in his ears, the hum from the machines vibrating through his bones. Then the figure spoke again, but this time, his words held an unexpected weight. "You think you're uncovering secrets about Musk, about the tunnel, but that's not what you're really here for. This place, these experiments, they're just the beginning." Jonathan felt the blood drain from his face. His mind raced to make sense of what the figure was saying. "Experiments? What do you mean?" The man tilted his head, a cold smile playing across his lips. "This facility isn't just for technology, Jonathan. It's not just about building the future. It's about creating something far beyond what any of you can understand." Lisa's eyes widened. "You're talking about genetic experiments, aren't you? What are you doing here? What's this place really for?" For the first time, the man seemed to hesitate. His mask concealed most of his expression, but Jonathan could see the subtle shift in his body language. Something about the way he stood told Jonathan that this wasn't the moment the man had been prepared for. The man's gaze shifted to the glowing tank in the center of the room. Jonathan followed his line of sight, dread slowly creeping into his chest. There, in the tank, was a strange figure, a human-like form, but not quite. It was suspended in a clear, viscous liquid, its features distorted and elongated. Jonathan's stomach churned as he realized the implications. This wasn't just some underground lab. This was a place of experimentation, something far darker than he had ever imagined. "The world isn't ready for what we've discovered," the man said quietly, "but we're making sure it's coming, whether they're prepared or not." Jonathan's pulse quickened. "What is that thing? What have you done?" The figure paused, as if deciding how much to reveal. Finally, he took a deep breath and spoke, his voice lowering to almost a whisper. "That is the next step in human evolution. Something Musk and his associates have been funding for years. They're trying to push the boundaries of what's possible, of what we can become." Jonathan felt like the ground had been ripped out from under him. "Musk knows about this?" The man's eyes glinted with something dark, almost amused. "He's not just involved. He's the mastermind behind it all. But you'll never prove it. Not unless you want to end up like those in the tank." Lisa's hand tightened around her gun, but Jonathan stayed her motion. He didn't know whether it was the man's words or the horrifying sight in front of them that paralyzed him. But whatever this was, it was much bigger than just a mansion, a tunnel, or a tech billionaire's empire. This was a shadow operation, one that had been building for years. And the truth? The truth was so much more dangerous than they had ever imagined. The figure's voice snapped Jonathan back to the present. "I don't want to hurt you, but if you continue down this path, you'll wish you never found this place." Jonathan stood tall, his heart hammering in his chest. He wasn't going to back down, not now. "We're not leaving without answers." The figure stepped back, as though weighing his next move. For a long moment, there was nothing but the faint hum of the machines and the thumping of their hearts. Then, unexpectedly, the figure turned. "You want to know what Musk is really doing?" He paused, glancing over his shoulder. "You'll find your answers where it all began. Follow the trail, but be warned. It will take you to places you never thought possible." Before Jonathan or Lisa could react, the man disappeared through a door at the far end of the lab, vanishing into the dark corridors beyond. Jonathan's mind reeled. Musk, genetic experimentation, evolution. What was the true purpose of this secret facility? "We have to go after him," Lisa said, her voice shaky but resolute. Jonathan nodded. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to fall into place, But the picture they were forming was far more dangerous than anything they had ever imagined. They had come here looking for answers about a tunnel, but now they were standing at the precipice of a conspiracy that could shake the foundations of everything they thought they knew. And the worst part? They were just beginning to understand the depth of the darkness that was about to consume them. "Let's go," Jonathan said. "This isn't over." The air was heavy as Jonathan and Lisa moved swiftly through the underground lab, their footsteps echoing against the cold stone floor. The flickering lights from the monitors cast an eerie glow on their faces, adding to the tension that clung to every step they took. They had narrowly escaped an encounter with the masked figure, but now, with their minds racing, they felt as though they were on the edge of something monumental. They had been exposed to a world that was both terrifying and full of unimaginable possibilities. And yet, they were still unsure how far Musk's involvement reached, or who else could be a part of this clandestine operation. Lisa glanced at Jonathan, her brow furrowed in deep thought. "We need to find a way to expose this, to stop it before it goes too far." Jonathan nodded, his mind replaying everything the mysterious figure had said. The reference to human evolution, the experiments, the hidden agendas. It was clear that the technology involved was far beyond what anyone could imagine, and it was being used for purposes far more sinister than they had ever anticipated. "I know," Jonathan said, his voice steady but filled with the weight of their mission. "But we can't just barge in and expose it to the world. If Musk is involved, then this is much bigger than just some illegal experiments. We're talking about a conspiracy that could bring down governments. The stakes are too high." Lisa shook her head, frustration creeping into her voice. "So what? We just leave it all hidden? We let people like Musk do whatever they want without consequences?" Jonathan stopped walking, his gaze turning toward the mysterious tank that had left them both shaken. The figure they had seen in the tank, the evidence of experimentation, it wasn't just an isolated incident. It was a terrifying glimpse of a future that no one was ready for. "No," Jonathan said firmly. "We have to find the truth. But we need a plan. A way to get the evidence out without becoming part of the experiment ourselves." Lisa crossed her arms, her face hardening. "So what? We sneak around some more, dig up more secrets, and hope we don't get caught?" Jonathan let out a slow breath, his eyes scanning the room. "We go after the key players. We find the people involved in this operation and bring them to light. We start with the ones who have the most to lose." As if on cue, a low, rumbling sound echoed through the facility, vibrating through the walls and floor beneath their feet. The ground seemed to tremble, and the faint hum that had been a background presence now intensified, pulsing with an energy that felt almost alive. "What the hell is that?" Lisa muttered, looking around with growing unease. Jonathan's mind raced. The sound, it was familiar. It reminded him of the earlier vibrations they had felt, the same energy that seemed to be resonating from deeper within the facility. Something was happening, something big. Before either of them could react, a loud bang reverberated through the air. The doors at the far end of the room flew open, and a team of men in dark suits poured in, moving with military precision. They were heavily armed, their expressions grim and unwavering as they began to fan out across the room. Jonathan's heart dropped. They had been caught. Lisa immediately moved to pull out her gun, but Jonathan grabbed her arm, pulling her behind a stack of equipment. "Stay down," he whispered urgently. "We can't afford to fight them. Not yet." As the men spread out, Jonathan and Lisa crouched in the shadows, their breath held in the stillness of the moment. They had been moments away from exposing the truth when this new wave of danger arrived. But now, they were trapped, and the only option left was to stay hidden and wait for an opportunity to strike. Time seemed to stretch as the armed men searched the lab, their movements sharp and methodical. Jonathan's thoughts raced. Who were these men? Were they Musk's private security, or something more? Then, as if to answer his question, a tall, familiar figure appeared at the head of the group. It was the same man in the dark suit, the one who had warned them earlier. His mask was still in place, but there was no mistaking the power he exuded as he surveyed the room. His eyes lingered on the glowing tank, and Jonathan could see the faintest flicker of recognition. He knew exactly what was at stake here, and it wasn't just about the technology. It was about control, control of something far beyond their comprehension. "I know they're here," the man said in a cold, commanding tone. "Find them." Jonathan's breath caught in his throat. The man was onto them, and if they didn't make a move soon, it would be too late. Lisa looked at him, her face filled with determination. "We have to go now, Jonathan. If they find us—" "I know," Jonathan whispered. "We'll make our move when the time's right." The room fell silent again. The only sound now the shuffle of boots on the concrete floor. Jonathan could feel the tension building in his chest as he waited for the perfect moment to act. The walls seemed to close in, the danger growing with every passing second. And then, as if the universe had granted them a brief window of opportunity, one of the armed men turned, his attention diverted by a noise coming from the far side of the room. Jonathan seized the moment. "Now," he hissed to Lisa. With swift precision, they moved, ducking low and weaving through the shadows. The men were scattered across the room, and Jonathan knew they only had a few seconds to slip past them undetected. They ran, their footsteps light but purposeful as they reached the far door. Jonathan glanced over his shoulder to make sure they weren't being followed. They weren't. Not yet. With a final glance at the lab, Jonathan and Lisa slipped through the door and into the dark hallway beyond. Their hearts were racing, adrenaline surging through their veins, but there was no turning back now. They had the answers they were looking for, at least some of them, but the full truth was still elusive, hidden somewhere deeper in the complex, surrounded by the walls of secrecy Musk had built. The next phase of their journey had just begun, and this time, they would fight with everything they had to expose the truth, to bring this dark operation into the light. But even as they escaped, Jonathan couldn't shake the nagging feeling that this was just the beginning of something far bigger than they had ever imagined. And soon, they would learn that the truth had a price, one that could change the world forever. Jonathan and Lisa moved through the dimly lit corridors, their steps echoing softly in the stillness. The tension in the air was palpable, thick with the weight of what they had just discovered. But they couldn't linger. There was no time to process the full scope of what was happening. No time to rest or reflect on their close call. The truth they had uncovered was far more dangerous than they had imagined, and it was only a matter of time before Musk's men would close in on them. Lisa's face was set in grim determination as she checked their surroundings. "We need to find the exit. Now." Jonathan nodded, his mind racing. They had a window of opportunity, but it wouldn't last long. The facility was vast, and it wouldn't be long before the security team realized they had slipped away. They needed to leave before reinforcements arrived. They rounded a corner, their pace quickening, when suddenly, a series of sharp, mechanical noises erupted from behind them. Jonathan spun around, his heart leaping into his throat. The noise was coming from a set of large steel doors at the end of the hallway. Something was happening, and it was happening fast. "Move," Jonathan barked, grabbing Lisa's arm and pulling her toward a side passage. They had no idea what lay ahead, but standing in the open hallway was not an option. They ducked down the narrow corridor, adrenaline coursing through their veins. "Where are we going?" Lisa gasped, her voice tinged with panic. Jonathan's mind was running through every possibility, trying to think of an escape route. He had no clear answers. The layout of the complex was still unfamiliar, and the danger they were in was intensifying by the second. Then, as they reached the end of the corridor, Jonathan spotted something that made his blood run cold. A massive set of double doors stood before them, the kind of reinforced entry that signified something important, a vault, a high-security area. It was their only way out, but it also felt like the heart of the operation. Behind those doors could be the answers to everything, or their final trap. Lisa's eyes narrowed. "That's it, isn't it? That's where they've been hiding everything." Jonathan's breath hitched. "It has to be." The sound of footsteps behind them made his decision for him. There was no turning back now. They ran for the doors, pushing against the weight of their fear and uncertainty. With a swift motion, Jonathan grabbed the handle and pulled. The doors creaked open with an unsettling groan, revealing a massive, high-tech control room. Inside, a series of glowing screens lined the walls, their images filled with data, graphs, and blueprints that Jonathan couldn't fully comprehend. But what caught his attention the most was the large, central console at the far end of the room. It was surrounded by rows of computers and monitors, each displaying cryptic, encrypted information. This was the nerve center of whatever operation Musk was running. Before they could take another step into the room, a voice boomed from behind them. "Stop!" Jonathan's blood ran cold. The man in the dark suit, the one they had encountered earlier, was standing in the doorway, flanked by two armed guards. His expression was cold, unfeeling, as he took in their presence. "You shouldn't have come here," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. Jonathan stood tall, his fear momentarily replaced by defiance. "We've seen enough to know that this isn't just about technology. This is about something far darker, and we're not leaving without exposing it." The man's lips curled into a smile, but it wasn't a pleasant one. "You really think you can stop this? You think the truth will set you free? This is bigger than you, Jonathan. Bigger than your wildest dreams." Lisa raised her gun, her finger hovering over the trigger, but Jonathan stopped her with a look. They were too close to the truth now to let fear or violence dictate their next move. They had one shot at this. "What's really going on here?" Jonathan demanded, his voice shaking with a mix of anger and disbelief. "What are you doing with all this? With Musk's money? What's the point of it all?" The man's gaze softened, almost as if he were considering Jonathan's question. He let out a long, slow breath. "It's not just about Musk's vision of the future," the man said quietly, his tone shifting to something almost philosophical. "It's about what lies beyond that vision. We're not just creating machines or technology. We're creating a new kind of humanity, a better humanity, one that's beyond the limitations of the human body, beyond the flaws that define us." Jonathan's mind spun. He had been right. This wasn't just about innovation. It was about transforming humanity itself into something else. And Musk was leading the charge. "We're taking the human race to the next stage of evolution," the man continued. "And there's no turning back. Not for us. Not for you." Jonathan's thoughts reeled. He could barely process the magnitude of what the man was saying. But one thing was clear. They were standing on the precipice of something that could change everything, for better or worse. "You're wrong," Jonathan said, his voice steady. "You're playing with people's lives, with their souls." The man's expression hardened. "You don't understand. This is bigger than you, Jonathan. It's bigger than all of us." Before Jonathan could respond, the man's guards stepped forward, their guns raised. "This is your last chance," the man said. "Leave now and forget everything you've seen. Or stay and face the consequences." The room fell silent, the tension thick in the air. Jonathan and Lisa exchanged a brief look, their decision made. There was no turning back now. "No," Jonathan said firmly. "We won't walk away. We'll fight." The man's eyes narrowed, but there was a flicker of something. Fear, perhaps? It was fleeting, but Jonathan saw it. The man wasn't as confident as he seemed. Maybe the truth was bigger than even he realized. "Then," the man said, his voice icy, "prepare for the consequences." As the guards moved forward, Jonathan and Lisa knew that the fight was just beginning. They had uncovered a truth so dangerous, so powerful, that there was no going back. But they also knew that exposing it to the world was the only way to stop it. And so, as the guards advanced and the room seemed to close in around them, Jonathan and Lisa braced for the fight of their lives. The final countdown had begun. The tension in the air was suffocating as the guards moved toward them. Jonathan and Lisa stood their ground, the weight of their decision pressing down on them. They had come too far to turn back, too close to the truth to back down now. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about ensuring that the dangerous experiment they had uncovered would never reach fruition. The man in the dark suit, still standing at the doorway, looked at them with a cold, calculating gaze. He didn't move to stop the guards. He just stood there, watching as the situation unfolded. Jonathan felt a surge of determination. This was it. No more running, no more hiding. The stakes had reached a point of no return. "Stay close," Jonathan whispered to Lisa, his voice low and steady. Lisa nodded, her face set in grim resolve. She had no intention of going down without a fight, not when they had a chance to stop this nightmare from spreading. The guards were almost upon them now, and in that moment, everything seemed to slow down. Jonathan's mind raced, formulating a plan in the span of mere seconds. His eyes flicked toward the control console at the back of the room, the nerve center of this entire operation. It was their only chance. If they could get to it, they might be able to expose everything, force Musk and his collaborators into the light. But as the guards closed in, Jonathan knew there was no time to waste. His fingers hovered over the gun at his side, and he silently prayed for the right moment. Suddenly, the man in the dark suit raised his hand, signaling for the guards to stop. Jonathan froze, his breath catching in his throat. What was going on? Why had he called off the guards? "Jonathan," the man said slowly, his voice almost thoughtful now. "You think this is all about control, don't you? About manipulating people. But you're missing the point. This is about evolution. We're not just transforming the way humans think or live. We're giving them a chance to transcend everything they've ever known, to break free of the limitations that have always held them back." Jonathan's heart pounded in his chest. The man's words struck a chord with something deep inside him. He had been right. This wasn't about technology or even wealth. It was about changing the very fabric of what it meant to be human. But there was something twisted about it. The idea that people, that human lives, could be treated as experiments for some grand vision. It was monstrous. Lisa's voice cut through the thick silence. "You think what you're doing is noble? It's not. It's wrong. You're playing God with people's lives." The man looked at her, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "You still don't understand, do you? This isn't about playing God. It's about pushing humanity to its next stage of existence. We're not just changing people. We're creating something new. Something perfect." "Perfect?" Jonathan repeated, his voice tinged with disbelief. "At what cost? You're building an army of mind-controlled people who have no say in their own future." The man's gaze darkened. "You're short-sighted. You see only what's in front of you, not the bigger picture. The world is broken, Jonathan. People are flawed. We're fixing it. We're creating a new breed of humanity, free from pain, from suffering, from weakness. The future belongs to us." Jonathan clenched his fists. He could feel the weight of the truth, the weight of the choice they had to make. This wasn't just a battle against one man or one corporation. It was a battle for the future of humanity itself. Lisa stepped forward, her voice sharp. "You can't just force your vision on everyone. You can't just decide what's best for everyone. People have the right to choose their own path." The man sighed, looking almost regretful. "And that is exactly why you don't understand. You're clinging to a dying world, clinging to your idea of free will. But the world is changing, and we'll be the ones to shape it." Jonathan's mind raced. There had to be something, some way to stop this. They had the evidence. They knew what was going on, and they had to get it to the world. But there was no escaping the fact that they were outnumbered, outgunned, and standing in the heart of a conspiracy that went beyond anything they had imagined. "We won't let you do this," Jonathan said, his voice steady but full of resolve. The man looked at him, then at Lisa, before his eyes turned cold. "It's too late for that. The plan is already in motion." Before Jonathan could react, the man made a sharp gesture, and the guards closed in once more. But this time, Jonathan wasn't going down without a fight. With a sudden, swift motion, Jonathan drew his gun and fired at the nearest guard. The shot rang out, and the guard fell to the ground with a thud. Lisa was right behind him, taking down another guard with expert precision. The room erupted into chaos. The man in the dark suit stepped back, watching the scene unfold with a detached interest. He didn't seem concerned. It was as if he knew exactly what would happen next. He knew that no matter what they did, they were still trapped in his web. But Jonathan wasn't going to give up. Not now. Not when they were so close. With one last push of adrenaline, Jonathan and Lisa fought their way to the central console, knocking out the remaining guards as they went. They reached the controls, and Jonathan's fingers flew over the buttons, trying to unlock the data, trying to pull up the files they needed to expose Musk's entire operation. Then, in the distance, Jonathan heard a soft click. The console powered up, the screens coming to life with a flood of data. It was all there. The files, the videos, the evidence they needed. "This is it," Jonathan said, his voice a mix of exhaustion and relief. "We've got it." Lisa nodded, her eyes locked on the screens as the data transferred to a secure device. "We need to get out of here fast." But before they could make their escape, the man in the dark suit spoke again, his voice laced with dark amusement. "You think this changes anything? You think you've won?" Jonathan turned to face him, his expression unwavering. "You don't control the future. We do." The man's expression faltered for a moment, but it was brief. Then, with a cold smile, he turned and walked toward the door, his guards following close behind. "You've won this round," he said, "but this isn't over. It's only just begun." With that, he disappeared into the shadows. Jonathan and Lisa stood in the control room, their bodies aching, but their spirits unbroken. They had exposed the truth. They had the evidence. And the world would soon know what Musk and his team had been hiding. It wasn't over, but they had won the first battle. And the truth would come to light. For better or for worse, the world would never be the same.